Good evening. Tonight we find ourselves at a critical juncture, a moment where the very fabric of the nation feels stretched thin. Here are the top United States headlines for June 14, 2025. Across the country, deep divisions are not just visible, they are palpable, erupting in ways that challenge our institutions and our sense of shared identity. In Washington, D.C., a grand display of military might, while in cities from coast to coast, a powerful counter-narrative unfolds in the streets, a chorus of dissent against the very idea of unchecked power. The day has been marked by starkly contrasting scenes of celebration and confrontation, unity and division. The stories we're covering tonight are not isolated incidents, but interconnected threads in a larger, more complex tapestry of American life in 2025. We'll look at an unprecedented military parade meant to celebrate the United States Army's 250th anniversary, an event championed by President Trump. Simultaneously, we'll examine the massive No Kings protests that have risen in opposition, a movement reflecting deep-seated anxieties about the direction of the country. These protests have been largely peaceful, but not entirely without incident, as we'll explore. We'll also delve into a deeply troubling development out of Los Angeles, where United States Marines have detained a civilian for the first time on American soil, a move that raises profound questions about military roles and civil liberties. The tension is not just in the streets, it's in our state houses, as a manhunt is underway for a suspect in the targeted shooting of lawmakers in Minnesota. And on the global stage, new threats of economic conflict loom. From a historic military parade to nationwide protests and political unrest, here's what you need to know. In the nation's capital today, the air was thick with the rumble of tanks and the precise cadence of marching soldiers. President Trump, fulfilling a long-held ambition, presided over a massive military parade to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the United States Army. The event was a spectacle of power, with armored vehicles, advanced weaponry, and thousands of service members marching down Pennsylvania Avenue. Supporters gathered to watch, waving flags and cheering, seeing the display as a powerful affirmation of national strength and a fitting tribute to the armed forces. For them, it was a moment of patriotism, a celebration of the military might that they believe underpins American greatness and security in a turbulent world. Yet beyond the barricades and the cheering crowds in D.C., a profoundly different story was unfolding. In cities across the entire country, a massive counter-movement took to the streets under the banner No Kings. These protests, organized in direct response to the parade, drew hundreds of thousands of participants who saw the event not as a celebration, but as a dangerous display of authoritarianism. They view President Trump's focus on military pageantry as deeply antithetical to democratic principles, a step toward the glorification of a strong man rather than the celebration of a republic. Their signs and chants echoed a fear that the nation is drifting away from its founding ideals. The No Kings movement was a testament to the power of peaceful assembly, with massive, orderly demonstrations in major hubs like New York, Chicago, and Denver. However, the day was not without its darker moments, where simmering tensions boiled over into violence. In Richmond, Virginia, clashes erupted between protesters and heavily armed counter-protesters, leading to several arrests and injuries. In San Francisco, a peaceful march was disrupted when a splinter group began vandalizing federal buildings, prompting a swift and forceful police response. And in Minneapolis, already on edge from recent political violence, protests grew tense, with skirmishes breaking out on the fringes of the main demonstration. These simultaneous events paint a picture of a nation starkly divided, living in two separate realities. One America celebrated military power and presidential authority, while the other marched in fear of those very things. The contrast couldn't be more dramatic: the polished boots of soldiers on pavement in Washington, and the worn-out sneakers of citizens marching for what they see as the soul of their democracy. The day's events highlight a fundamental disagreement not just about policy, but about the very nature and symbolism of American power, a schism that seems to grow deeper with each passing day, leaving us to wonder how these two visions of the country can continue to coexist. Tonight we are grappling with an event that many legal and constitutional scholars have long feared but never witnessed on American soil. For the first time in modern history, active-duty United States Marines have detained a United States civilian within the country's borders. The incident occurred in Los Angeles amid ongoing unrest related to federal immigration enforcement actions. According to eyewitnesses and preliminary reports, a tense standoff between protesters and federal agents escalated, and a unit of Marines deployed to the city to protect federal facilities intervened directly. They took a civilian protester into custody, a move that represents a shocking and unprecedented breach of the Posse Comitatus Act, which generally forbids the use of the military for domestic law enforcement. The legal and constitutional implications of this action are staggering and cannot be overstated. The deployment of federal troops to American cities, including Portland, Seattle, and now Los Angeles, has already been a point of extreme contention. But the physical detention of a citizen by the military, rather than by civilian police or federal law enforcement agencies like the FBI or Homeland Security, crosses a critical line. It raises fundamental questions about the separation of military and civilian authority, a cornerstone of American democracy designed to protect citizens from military overreach. The Pentagon has been silent so far, and the Department of Justice has only issued a vague statement about protecting federal personnel. The individual who was detained has not yet been identified, and their current status and location remain unclear, adding another layer of alarm to the situation. Civil liberties organizations are scrambling for information and are already promising a swift and forceful legal challenge. They argue that this action sets a perilous precedent, potentially opening the door for the military to be used as a domestic police force at the discretion of the executive branch. This is the very scenario that the framers of the Constitution sought to prevent, fearing a standing army could be turned against the populace it is meant to protect. This incident in Los Angeles is not just a local story, it is a national crisis in the making. It forces a confrontation with one of the most basic questions of our republic. What is the proper role of the military in a free society? The presence of soldiers on our streets was already a sign of deep distress, but their active involvement in law enforcement signals a potential breakdown of established legal norms. How the White House, the Pentagon, and the courts respond in the coming hours and days will be a defining test for the rule of law and the future of civil liberties in the United States. In Minnesota, a state already reeling from political tension, a desperate manhunt is now underway. Law enforcement agencies are searching for Vance Luther Bolter, named as the primary suspect in the brazen and politically motivated shootings of two state lawmakers earlier this week. The attack, which left one legislator critically injured and the other with serious wounds, has sent shockwaves through the state's political establishment and beyond. Authorities have described the shootings as a calculated and targeted assault, designed to intimidate and terrorize elected officials. This act of violence is not a random crime. It is being investigated as an act of domestic terrorism. Vance Luther Bolter, the man at the center of this manhunt, is believed to be heavily armed and extremely dangerous. The FBI has now joined state and local police in the search, releasing photos and details about the suspect to the public. They have urged citizens not to approach him but to report any sightings immediately. Bolter is reported to have ties to extremist anti-government militias, and has a history of posting vitriolic threats against politicians online. His digital footprint paints a disturbing picture of a man radicalized by political rhetoric and conspiracy theories, culminating in this horrific act of violence against the very symbols of the democratic process he despised. This incident in Minnesota is a stark and brutal symptom of a much larger disease spreading across the country, the normalization of political violence. In recent years, threats against public officials, from school board members to members of Congress, have skyrocketed. The heated and often dehumanizing language used in our political discourse has created an environment where some individuals feel justified in translating their anger into physical attacks. What happened in Minnesota is the tragic but logical conclusion of a political climate where opponents are framed not as fellow citizens with different views, but as enemies to be vanquished by any means necessary. The search for Bolter is therefore more than just a hunt for one man. It is a desperate attempt to reassert a fundamental principle of a civil society, that political disagreements must be settled at the ballot box, not with a bullet. The fear now is that this attack may not be an isolated event, but a harbinger of more to come. It has cast a dark shadow over state houses and government buildings across the nation, forcing officials to operate under heightened security and reminding us all of the fragility of the peaceful transfer of power and the democratic process itself when threatened by extremism and violence. Shifting our focus to the economy, President Trump today signaled the opening of a new front in his long-running trade wars. During a press conference at the White House, he announced his intention to impose a new wave of unilateral tariffs, this time targeting a broad range of goods from both the European Union and several key Asian trading partners. The president did not specify the exact products or the tariff rates, but he stated the measures would be implemented within the next 30 days. He justified the move by citing unfair trade practices and the need to protect American industries, reprising the same nationalistic economic arguments that have defined his presidency. This sudden announcement immediately sent shockwaves through global financial markets. Stock futures in the United States tumbled, and markets in Asia and Europe, which were open at the time of the announcement, saw sharp declines. The move caught many economists and business leaders by surprise, as it comes at a time when the global economy is already fragile. The prospect of a new multi-front trade war threatens to disrupt supply chains, increase costs for consumers, and create a climate of uncertainty that could stifle investment and economic growth. The United States Chamber of Commerce immediately issued a statement condemning the plan, warning that it would harm American businesses and workers. International reaction has been swift and uniformly negative. A spokesperson for the European Commission called the threat unjustified and regrettable, and vowed that the European Union would respond swiftly and appropriately with retaliatory tariffs if the United States proceeds. This sets the stage for a tit-for-tat trade conflict that could be even more damaging than the previous disputes with China. Allies in Asia have also expressed deep concern, viewing the move as a destabilizing action that undermines the rules-based international trading system. They see it as another example of America First policy alienating traditional partners and creating global economic instability. At home, the debate over these potential tariffs is already reigniting. Supporters of the president praise the move as a tough but necessary step to rebalance global trade and bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States. They believe that short-term economic pain is a worthy price for long-term national gain. However, a wide coalition of opponents, including many farmers, manufacturers who rely on imported components, and retail groups, argue that these tariffs are a self-inflicted wound. They contend that it is American consumers and businesses who will ultimately pay the price through higher costs and lost export markets, pushing the nation closer to a recession. The events of this single day, June 14, 2025, have laid bare the deep fractures running through the American landscape. From the symbolic battle between a military parade and the No Kings protests, to the alarming use of military personnel and domestic law enforcement, the foundations of our republic are being tested. The political violence in Minnesota and the looming threat of a new trade war only add to a profound sense of instability. These are not just headlines, they are inflection points that will shape the future of the nation, forcing us to confront difficult questions about who we are and what we stand for as a country. Each of these stories is complex, with layers of history and context that we've only begun to explore tonight. The detention of a civilian by Marines in Los Angeles, the manhunt for a political extremist, the consequences of new tariffs. These are situations that will continue to develop in the hours and days ahead. Understanding them is not just an academic exercise, it's essential for anyone trying to navigate these turbulent times. The need for clear, factual information has never been greater, as has the need for thoughtful civil discussion about the path forward. We will continue to follow all of these developments closely, bringing you the latest information as we get it. For more details on any of these stories, let us know which topic you want to dive deeper into. Your engagement helps us understand what matters most to you. In these uncertain times, knowledge is our most powerful tool. Thank you for joining us. Stay informed and stay safe.